explanation of the programs, including a PowerPoint presentation, and then we'll do some questions at the end. So let's start with Michelle Mcgurk. Michelle Mcgurk is an assistant to the city manager for the city of San Jose. She's managed local assistance programs in the city's Emergency Operations Center since last March, and she's coordinated more than $65 million in funding to help San Jose's most vulnerable residents, nonprofits, and businesses. We're also joined here tonight by Consuelo Hernandez. She is the director of the Office of Supportive Housing for the County of Santa Clara. Her team works to support the county's mission of promoting healthy, safe, and prosperous community by ending and preventing homelessness. And since 2015, the county and its partners have helped nearly 14,000 homeless adults, families, and children move into permanent housing. We also have tonight Chad Boyorkas. He is the Chief Program Officer for Destination Home, which is a public-private partnership working to end homelessness in Santa Clara County. The nonprofit organization collaborates with partners such as Santa Clara County and the city of San Jose and dozens of others to address the root causes of homelessness. The county's homelessness prevention program, which helps provide financial help and legal support for families at risk of homelessness, is one of those efforts. And finally, we also have on the panel tonight Emily Hislop, and she has been with Project Sentinel since 2016, and she manages the dispute resolution and hearing process for rent stabilization programs in Mountain View and Hayward. In addition, she keeps agency staff up to date on rental housing laws and issues. During her tenure with the agency, she has gained expertise in state and local rental housing laws, including the landmark Tenant Protection Act of 2019 and the wave of urgency rental housing legislation and ordinances in response to the COVID-19 emergency. So we'll get started right now with Michelle's presentation, followed by Consuelo, Chad, and then Emily. So we'll get the screen up in a moment and turn it over to Michelle to get started.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for being here tonight and joining us. The need for rental assistance is tremendous in our county, and we want to encourage everyone, if there's one message you take away from tonight, it is that there is rental help available. And if you're a tenant, there's assistance available, but you can also tell your landlord and encourage them to apply. There's funding available today from the state of California, and it's really, really critical that folks persist through the process. There's folks to help you, and that you get the rental assistance that you need. So next slide, please. We can get started. So just a little bit to tell you what's happened already before the current program. And that is, if back in 2017, a number of nonprofit organizations together with the cities in the county and the county joined together to create the Homelessness Prevention System. And this was really a resource for families who were on the verge of homelessness due to bills, job loss, medical needs, and so forth. And when the pandemic hit last year, suddenly having so many folks in our community out of work and needing help, the Homelessness Prevention System pivoted, and with support from the cities and counties, philanthropy, and other resources, was able to provide $36 million in 2020 countywide, both rent relief and direct financial assistance to families in need. So 15,000 families were helped. This is a little bit of data about who was in need at that time. And really, as we launched the program, and kudos to Sacred Heart and Destination Home, who were the lead agencies to get this program off the ground. As we launched it, we really wanted to center those who were most impacted by the pandemic and the pandemic-related job loss, and those who were really at risk of displacement and losing their homes if they couldn't pay their rent. And so really, as you can see from the data here, at the time of being helped, some of the families, their rent was $1,700 a month, and the average family was bringing in $1,000 a month. So that's not going to add up to be able to pay the rent. And that's just one critical bill. And many of these families were living in overcrowded subletting situations, just very vulnerable in the pandemic, both to the illnesses with COVID as well as the job loss. So as we looked at what we're going to do with the federal money that's come available, we really want to build on the success that we had of reaching the most vulnerable. So next slide, please. So thankfully, the federal government has provided assistance. The first round came at the end of 2020 with some budget actions that Congress took, and that provides $25 billion both directly to states and then to cities and counties across the country with more than 200,000 residents. So in round one, the state of California has allocated their money to each county and then to the larger cities in the county. And these are funds that are in the bank at the state of California to benefit us. So there's $62 million to benefit San Jose and Santa Clara County. And then we received direct funding from the federal government. And so San Jose received $30.3 million and Santa Clara County received just under $27 million. And this is called the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. There is more money coming later this year, thanks to the American Rescue Plan. There's another $21.5 billion that will go to states and cities and counties with targeted funds for high need areas. This all sounds like a lot of money, but I just want to set it in context that we have 66,000 households in the city of San Jose alone who are extremely low income. That means that they are earning, if it's a family of four, less than $50,000 a year. And many of those families are hurting right now because they worked in jobs that were impacted by the pandemic, or they were disproportionately impacted by COVID-19 illness. And there's been various different estimates of how many people face this rental cliff when the eviction moratoriums expire later this year. Roughly 19 to 20% of renters is what's estimated. And that would take up all of the local direct funding to help those families that I just talked about. So a lot of need. So if we can go to the next slide, I can tell you who these funds are eligible to help. So the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, and this is going to be, the funds can be used through September of next year. They can be used for back rent. They can be used for forward rent. They can be used for utility payments in addition to rent and other housing expenses. Back rent can be paid in 12-month increments. Forward rent can be paid in 3-month increments. And the preference is that the federal government has outlined is to pay the landlord or the utility company directly. The folks who qualify are households with one or more individuals that have been unemployed, can attest that they've experienced financial hardship due to the pandemic or pandemic-related job losses, are at risk of homelessness, have household incomes below 80% of AMI. So the AMI for our area is $151,300 a year. So 80% of that is sort of where it's at. And this is based on your 2020 income, either your 2020 tax returns, or it can be looked at on a monthly basis if you're currently unemployed. This assistance isn't just for folks renting apartments or homes. It does include mobile homeowners who are renting or leasing the space that their mobile home occupies. And it can't duplicate other federal housing assistance. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Consuelo to tell you a little bit about how the state is implementing their program. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, everybody. Consuelo Hernandez. Next slide, please. As Michelle mentioned, the state received an allocation of emergency rental assistance through the U.S. Treasury. And the way that they are implementing the resources is through Senate Bill 91, which was passed by the legislation earlier this year. And through that legislation, what they included was a program design or designation of how they would allocate the resources locally. And what the state offered cities and counties across the state were basically 3 options to participate. And those options were weighed by the different communities. In our community locally, between the city and the county of Santa Clara, we opted for the 3rd option, which allows the state to administer their program on behalf of the city and the county, and to allow the local program be administered by the county and the city separately. And so what the state did is they allocated by population in a block grant format. And their program has an online application portal. If you are a tenant or a landlord listening to us tonight, the portal is up and running. They have a multilingual call center. Later this evening, Emily will share with you the process on how to access the dollars with some screenshots about what to expect once you submit an application. And the focus of the state is really on landlords working with their tenants to apply. Their focus also includes back rent, even though, as Michelle mentioned, the U.S. Treasury does allow forward rent. The state is currently focusing on that back rent. The program launched in March 15th, and as part of our work with the state, the city of San Jose and the county of Santa Clara came together to negotiate the terms of our agreement with the state, which I will talk about briefly. Next slide, please. Locally, the county staff went to the Board of Supervisors for direction, and the City of San Jose staff talked to their city council about what were the findings, as Michelle mentioned earlier in her presentation, is what were the findings or the outcome of the program that was administered last year. And really what we found is that folks at the lowest income spectrums are those that are in most need and that would benefit most from a locally designed program. So our focus will be on households that are extremely low income, earning 30% of area median income or less, and those households that are at risk of displacement. As Michelle mentioned, we saw families whose income fell significantly down to the point where they can no longer pay their rent. And so really we looked at, designed the program that helped address those zip codes with the highest rates of COVID impact, both by being COVID positive or by actually losing their jobs. So there's 5 specific zip codes in the city of San Jose that we'll be working on, but also a couple of other areas in the county. Our program has been designed to focus, it's one program administered through our homelessness prevention system. Our goal is to have a simple and easy to use application form, simplified payment systems. We've taken into account folks that cannot, if you have a challenge in accessing, you don't have a bank account, we've factored in a lot of the lessons learned from last year in designing this program, and ultimately making sure that we meet the requirements that are set forth through the U.S. Treasury about preventing duplication. Next slide, please. And what we've done over the last couple of weeks is really creating a complementary rental assistance program. And as I mentioned, we selected in our community for a hybrid approach. And what this allows us to do is to work very closely with the state in how they're administering their program in our community. Michelle and I have been working very closely with State of California's HCD team in setting those terms. And hopefully you'll see through Emily's presentation that a lot of what we've asked for is contained in that implementation. Our local program, as I mentioned, will focus on the ELI the ELI households, because that is where we are seeing the most need. We made this decision based on the data that we've collected, the direction that we've been given from our elected officials, and also we wanted to create a simple to understand program. And Chad will step in next to talk about how those programs differ from a timing perspective.
Thank you, Michelle and Consuelo, and happy to be here. Hello, everyone. And I just wanted to start by saying that none of this coordination and none of the program locally gets done by any one of us. This is like a true collaboration and partnership between the city of San Jose, county of Santa Clara, our partners at Sacred Heart and their network of assistance partners, and then now a vast growing network of grassroots and community partners, which I'll talk more about, as well as friends at Project Sentinel and other organizations who are helping kind of deploy the state program. There is lots and lots of coordination and partnership happening between all of those organizations. So thank you. Next slide, please. So we're gonna walk through just the high level details of what is somewhat complicated process between the state and the local program so that we can make sure that people know where to get help when. So from now through the middle of May, early to mid-May, we are basically pointing everyone to the state program. And Emily with Project Sentinel is going to talk a little bit more detail about that. But what's good to know is that that program and the funding that's going directly to the state is being prioritized for tenants who are 50% of the area median income and below. And we really appreciate that focus for the most vulnerable in the community, and that's being carried through at the state level as well as the federal level. But anybody who's 80% area median income and below does qualify. And that program will pay up to 80% of the past due rent, going back for a whole year towards the beginning of the pandemic. And that is a deal that was worked out between the landlords and the state through SB 91 to where they can pay 80% of the back rent and the landlords will forgive the other 20%. And there is, as you can see on the bottom left, there is there's an option if the landlord doesn't want to do that agreement. There still is the opportunity to pay 25% of the past rent to make sure that the tenant is still protected due to the SB 91 eviction protections that go through June 30th. So again, for tenants, there's a priority for tenants who are 50% AMI, but any 80% AMI and below do qualify. And for the local program from now through mid-May, basically everything is going to the state. And in fact, we're doing a concentrated outreach effort to make sure that mobile homeowners, mobile home owners and the park owners know to send all of their tenants there. Deed restricted units, which is like affordable housing units, Eden housing, EAH housing, etc. All should go to housingiskey.com and apply from now through mid-May. Next slide, please. Meanwhile, what's happening for the local program, which will come into effect, as I said, in mid-May, and more details to come on the specific dates, etc. Then we'll have a transition where we're going to kind of separate. And for the state program, the households who are at the higher levels of income, so between 30% and 80% of the area median income, will go to the state portal still. But then anybody who's 30% of the area median income, so the lowest, most vulnerable households in our community, will get directed to the local program that we're building now. And I'll go into a little bit more detail here shortly. For landlords, same deal. The 80% of the past due rent and then the other 20% gets written off. But that covers all of the year going back. And again, if it's a tenant and the landlord doesn't want to take that deal, the state will still pay the 25% rent going back. And so again, for even after May, if you're 50%, 80% AMI, please continue to go to the state portal, as well as landlords can go directly to the state portal now through as long as they have money. And then starting in mid-May, the local program, which Destination Home and Sacred Heart and the County of Santa Clara and the City of San Jose and many other partners have been are busy building as we speak. We'll be serving the 30% area median income and below. We'll also be doing the same pay up to 80% of the past due rent for going back for the year. And then depending on the household situation, we will also be considering payment of rent going forward and other supports and referrals, and making sure really that those households don't become homeless. That's like our #1 focus. We're going to dig in with the households that we're serving who are the most vulnerable households in Santa Clara County, and do whatever we can to make sure that they don't become homeless, which includes forward-looking rent, the back rent, supportive services, making sure that you have access to whatever resources are needed to stay housed and make sure that the family can stay stable. Next slide, please. So a little bit more detail about the local program. This program is continuing to build, as has all of our COVID relief over the last year, on the existing Santa Clara County Homelessness Prevention System. This is the system that has been coordinated by Sacred Heart Community Service since 2017 and previously involved 15 organizations, many of which folks are familiar with throughout the whole county, the Emergency Assistance Network organizations, as well as a consortium of domestic violence and human trafficking specialized organizations, the Law Foundation for Legal Assistance, and more. But we're adding to that network with Sacred Heart 6 new partners, as well as 26 community-based partners. So a total of almost 50 organizations across the whole county will all be using the same software system, the same process, the same rules to distribute assistance, and the same level of support throughout the whole county. Those partners are going to do outreach to their constituents to make sure that we are accessing the most vulnerable people in the community. So really leveraging the trusted relationships and the knowledge that these partners have in the community with their folks, and outreaching to the specific areas of our county where COVID has had the biggest impact. The application process, we are targeting a launch of May 10th. So when we're talking about early to mid-May, we're really targeting May 10th, and we are on target for that. We've been spending a lot of time making sure that we simplify all of our processes and making sure that all of the barriers that we learned about through feedback from previous rounds are being eliminated, or at least streamlined. And we're going to have multiple ways to apply. The #1 will be a brand new online application portal, which is super robust and specifically designed for emergency rental assistance program. We will have a referral phone line and email address. And then we have this network of 47 partners, which literally blanket the entire county, that will be access points to hold people's hands and walk them through this process and make sure that the application process itself is not a barrier to folks getting the help they need. So I think I'm passing it over to Emily to go into more detail about the offering that's open now. And thanks for the opportunity.
That was very helpful. Thank you very much, everyone, Chad and Consuelo and Michelle. And we're going to queue up right now the presentation for Emily. So it'll be just another minute or so. Oh, perfect. We're ready for it.
I want to thank Michelle, Consuelo, and Chad, and some of what they covered I may cover in this presentation, but I won't dwell on it. We're more going to cover things that have come up in us being, as it says here, we're a local partner with the state's implementer. Next slide. So for those of you who don't know, Project Sentinel is a nonprofit housing services agency, and we serve many communities in Northern California, including most of the South Bay. One of our core services is neutral landlord-tenant counseling and dispute resolution. And this includes supporting some cities with the administration of the rent stabilization hearing and petition processes. But we are in the business of explaining programs and laws to landlords and tenants from a neutral perspective. So it made sense for us to apply to be a local partner and try to help people through this process when they call us for their other housing issues. We don't give legal advice or legal representation, but we do offer tips and best practices and an overview of any local and state laws. Just want to say that for any questions that may come up later. Next slide. So we'll just go over the rent relief program. I will also mention I have my colleague Joanne Pham with us. She's part of our ERAP team and I've been fielding a lot of the questions we get and doing some research. So if we have any more technical questions, I may defer to her later on. Next slide. So Michelle Consuelo and Chad had covered a little bit about who qualifies for the state rent assistance program, that it's, anybody who's at or below 80% of AMI can qualify, but I thought it can be useful to show what those numbers mean. So the chart at the bottom, we've highlighted what the 80% threshold is, and those numbers 1, 2, 3, 4 is how many people are in the household. So if you have a family of 4 that is making, say, $60,000, they are they're below the very low income threshold at 50%. And you'll see that what everyone was referring to as ELI, 30%, a family of 4, that would be families of 4 earning less than $47,350 annually. One of the questions we get rather frequently is, how do you calculate household income? What it means is that everybody who lives in the unit, in the household, who is earning money and is over 18, that's whose income is being counted. So if it's roommates, both their incomes are one household, but they are considered a single household for the purposes of rent relief. Also was covered is there's a priority for the arrearages, the back rent, but pending funding availability, rent back utility payments and forward rent could also be covered. So next slide. So as everyone had mentioned, in the state's program, the application can be initiated by either the landlord or tenant. We're saying initiated because even though a landlord may start the process, in order to complete the process, the tenant has to do some portion as well. It's really beneficial for everyone if the landlord initiates the process, but that doesn't preclude a tenant from doing so. And you'll hear me say over and over again, we want our landlords and tenants to try to communicate to each other if either one of them is applying, because both of you can help each other out through this process and get the most benefit from this program. So one of the great things is that landlords can receive up to 80% of, not up to, they will receive 80% of a qualifying tenant's unpaid rent that came due between April of last year and March of this year, but they have to agree to forgive the remaining 20%. And that's one of the first questions that's asked in the landlord's application. So if a tenant gets noticed that their landlord has applied, they've already agreed to this. So this is a great incentive for landlords to get this going, and they get the benefit of a big payment all at once instead of trying to chase down money over time from somebody who really is hurting. So also, as Chad had mentioned, if for some reason the landlord won't participate, a qualifying tenant will still receive 25% of the unpaid rent. And this should cover them so they are protected from eviction, because one of the requirements, in addition to signing a declaration of financial distress due to COVID, is that between September of last year and June of this year, a tenant has to pay at least 25% of their rent. So they can apply to get that portion covered and be protected from eviction. As I said in the last one, unpaid utilities may also be covered by the program. And there's a section in the application for putting those debts in as well. Next slide. So I'm covering this because this is a question we get asked, just the way that the online application looks. So the two of the prongs, other than being under 80% of the AMI, is that they're financially impacted, that they've applied for unemployment benefits or experienced a reduction in household income, incurred significant costs, or other financial hardship due to COVID-19. The declaration that everyone's been talking about, that satisfies this prong. And I don't know if that's clear enough, or people just get, think that they have to have some other proof. The declaration itself that the landlord should have given to tenants who had unpaid rent, and the tenants should have then signed, that fulfills this prong. And then the other eligibility requirement is that there has to be a risk of experiencing homelessness or housing instability. And then they list all these things, past due utilities, unsafe or unhealthy living conditions. But really, if you've received a 3-day notice or a 15-day notice to pay or quit, that meets this requirement. You're considered at risk of homelessness or housing instability. Next slide, please. So what is needed to apply? The state has provided checklists in multiple languages of the types of documentation, but we want to go a step further and say, here's what really you need just to begin the process. So an applicant needs to have access to the internet. They need an email address to register for the portal and have some ability to upload documents, which actually most people have smartphones now with cameras, and we can coach people on how to take a picture of a document and use that to upload. For those that we know that, some people don't use email or not comfortable, they don't understand that process. If they have a trusted relative or friend that can help them through this, whose email address they could either set up their own, but that person can assist them with this process who may have steady internet access. There are partners available who can walk people through the process, but we can help and support people, as can the state, if they have someone there who has the internet and the ability to upload documents that the applicant may not. So we're trying to find ways to get people who really are technologically challenged or just don't have access to broadband. We're trying to find other community resources that will we can point people to who really need more assistance in the process. So next page, slide. So when the tenant applies, they need to have contact info for the landlord, and then they're going to be asked for documents that will verify their identity, verify their income, residence, the amount of rent owed, and a utility payment if there's back utility payments. So there's some items that may serve multiple categories. So if a tenant is already eligible for SNAP or Head Start, that document will prove their income eligibility. It should show their residence, and may support legal identity. The verifying rent owed, our most recent rent increase notice, or even the 15-day notice that lists what the monthly rent was due, lease documents, but we're trying to come up with alternative ways because we know sometimes people signed a lease 10 years ago and then, they now pay a different amount of rent than what's on their lease. The state makes it very clear, and we emphasize that citizenship is not a question. Applicants will not be asked about their citizenship, nor will they be required to show proof of citizenship. The state has put this on their website, and they want tenants to feel comfortable applying, that there's no immigration status is not a part of this process at all. Next slide, please. So where do you go to apply? The state has set up a website. They have a couple, all these links go to the same place. So housingisp.com. They thought this would be a handy thing to remember. Or in Spanish, la vivienda es clave, .com. But these both take you to this complete website, which is housing.ca.gov. And landlords and tenants can go here. This is where they'll go to apply and also go to find forms and a lot of other resources, information for tenant rental housing. So next slide will be what the state's portal looks like, sorry, the state's website looks like. This is it, and where I've highlighted is where you would click to start the rent relief application process. Just to the right of where I've circled, that's in peach, is the way to access the same page in Spanish. There are other languages. They are slowly getting everything translated, but right now they have English and Spanish for sure. I haven't checked today. Maybe there's more. So this is where you go. And next slide. So I just want to note that in that slot, when you click on that, there'll be some initial questions to check where you are and your eligibility before you're actually launched into an application. This is what the state has provided for, like a process flow of what happens when, at the top left, you'll see when the landlord initiates the applications, the tenant will then receive an email inviting them to participate, and includes a link to the to the landlord's application. So they will see everything that the landlord provided, what information and documents, and they will verify that information. So the landlord might say, will detail what amounts of rent were owed. And the tenant at that point just verifies, or if there's any dispute, they can indicate that too. And then there's supposed to be a case manager. There's case managers on the state side. So their implementer, once both landlord and tenant have completed, the case manager will work with the landlord and tenant to complete the application. And then once it's complete, the payment will be processed. Let's see, well, I don't know why oh, that's there. So when the tenant initiates the application, they will get this 5-digit case ID number. And then an email will be sent to the landlord inviting them to participate, which includes links to the 5-digit case ID. I know there's many tenants that do not have email addresses for their landlords. There may be landlords that don't have email addresses that they share, but the tenant can notify the landlord in writing, or however they normally communicate, and let them know that they've applied, and give them that 5-digit case ID number. We're trying to see if the state's implementer can have another way for tenants to notify their landlords. But again, this is why we really think either party, if a landlord's going to apply on behalf of their tenant, we strongly encourage them to reach out and let them know that they've done that and what's coming. And same with the tenants. That will open up these channels of communications and make this process easier for everyone. So if the landlord doesn't participate on the tenant's behalf, then it will the process shifts, and it will then go to giving the application will be processed to give 25% of the back rent to the tenant. And I believe the tenant can then reapply for future rent of like the 25%, so they're covered through June if they're still impacted. There is a call center. We encourage people with any questions about the application process to call the state's rent relief call center. The number's there. It's on their website, 833-430-2122. Next slide. So I said how when a landlord applies, a tenant will receive an email. We got a call from a tenant who received such an email, and they weren't sure if it was authentic. They thought perhaps it was a phishing scam. And because it does say California COVID-19 rent relief, but it comes from the software program, Neighborly Software. So we went ahead and created an account so we can have an email to show people, if you get an email that has Neighborly Software in it, it's authentic. And this is your landlord applying, and you can reach out to your landlord if you're not sure, but we wanted to show people what this looked like, and that the domain name of the email address will say neighborlysoftware.com, because I don't think people would necessarily expect that or realize that it's the same software. So it's not a phishing scam. If you still aren't sure, you can call the state, you can contact us. Our website will be on in a later slide. So this is what the emails look like. Next slide. I know we're talking about rent relief. I'm just going to quickly note that Project Sentinel also, we have a HUD housing, a certified housing division, counseling division, and AB 3088, the first set of laws that the state passed in September, had some mortgage relief for small landlords. So a small landlord is an owner of 4 or fewer properties, and that each property has 4 or less units. So there are, you can go to the next slide. There are some options for landlords that may be impacted greatly by tenants being impacted and not being able to pay rent. And our mortgage counselors can help them work with their lenders to either work with forbearance options, mortgage modification, or repayment plans. But we want to get the word out because we know that there are impacts to small landlords that may not, people might be concerned that the rent relief program won't address, but we want to show people that there's other options out there and that our mortgage counseling division can assist. Okay, next slide. So here's our COVID-19 page. Our website is housing.org, and we made a COVID-19 resource and information page. We're trying to present a lot of the information that the state's given that might be more accessible to those in our jurisdictions like Santa Clara County. And we have links to the checklists and other information that the state's provided to help people through the process. And we add local programs as well. So once the county program and Destination Homes launches, we will have information and links there. So it's a good page to check out, and anytime something changes, we'll update the website immediately. Last slide. So I'm gonna leave up the slide with the housing is key website, various addresses to get you to how you can start the rent relief process or get access to forms or learn more information. I also put our website there too, so you can try to bookmark that. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Emily. This was incredibly helpful. And what I'm hearing a lot is cooperation. It's really important to get cooperation from the landlord and the tenant and for them to work together to maximize the relief. So these are very helpful presentations. And now we have some questions from the audience and some questions that folks had submitted to us. And we'll open this up to all the panelists and whoever is able to answer that question, please jump in. But I think one of the first questions that folks have is how long will it take to get the money, right? A lot of the eviction moratoriums expire at the end of June. We know that folks are worried about having all this back rent that's not going to be forgiven. So getting the money in people's hands is critical. How quickly, and this is open to anyone on the panel who wants to take it, how quickly will people start getting the money once they apply?
Emily, do you want to add for the state program? For the local program, Ramona, it depends on, how fast the household is able to provide the documentation, because our local program will focus through like our homelessness prevention system. The typical turnaround can be anywhere between 5 and 7 days, depending on what the needs are of that household. And then also if they're just focused on the back rent or forward rent. But I think any time that we can turn something around by the time they need the money. So if it's earlier in the month and they're looking for assistance for the following month, then our goal would be to meet that timeline so that they don't continue to collect this debt from not being able to pay their rent.
And currently, I don't know what the turnaround time is from when the application's complete on the state program. Michelle or Consuelo might have some info, but there's a metaphor that's been used for the vaccine rollout that I think is applicable to this, that the state's building the plane as they're flying it. So they opened up the application process, but not everything is fallen into place, but they wanted people to get started. but they may not be at the point of actually cutting checks because they have to verify, a case manager has to verify all the information. They have to verify that there's no duplication of funds. So once those processes are in place, we'll be able to give people a better idea. But right now, I'm not sure if any in any jurisdiction
yeah, I think in our conversations with the state, the checks are beginning to roll out, the verifications are starting to happen. But what I would urge is if you owe back rent and you are worried about that June eviction cliff, the June 30th date, start working on your application right now. There are groups who can help you and more are coming online locally. If you go to the state website, there is a list of groups in the like Project Sentinel. There are other, Catholic Charities was just recently added to the state website. They will be another potential partner if you need help. The other thing is if you need help, now if you're on a webinar, you probably have some way of accessing the internet, but if you have neighbors or friends who need internet access, we are beginning to see some of the community libraries being opened as technology centers. So in the city of San Jose, I believe currently the Tully Library and Roberto Cruz libraries are open by appointment and more are coming online. Those are the types of things, and if there are nonprofits you've typically worked with in the past for help, they're probably part of our network. So, you know, it's really important to just get that process started as early as you can. Talk to your landlord, encourage your landlord to apply.
Yes, that's very helpful. Thank you very much for answering that question. And we have about 7 or 8 questions from the audience, from people who are watching tonight. So I apologize if the Q&A box is not up, but we will call on you. I see your hands are raised, and please feel free to ask your question. If you want to direct it at a certain panelist, please go ahead and do that, or if you want to just open it up to everyone. And so we'll start with Jerry Amaro. So Jerry, you will be able to speak in just a moment. We're going to unmute you to ask your question.
Can you hear me now? I came in a little late and I reviewed some of the documents that were online. And, you know, my only question, I may have missed it, but how is the landlord going to prove that I owe him or her, you know, the housing 7 months worth of rent? How are they going to prove that? Where is the proof going to come from? You know, that's my main question, because if you got that proof, you're going to get it easy. You'll get the landlord will get paid if he agrees to accept 80% of the money or whatever. But the question is, how is the landlord going to prove that I owe him 7 months worth of rent? Say it's $2,000 a month, $1,500 a month. That's a lot of money. So,
Thank you, Jerry. Is there any panelists that can talk about how they prove that?
So
or any documentation that would be required?
Yeah, so the landlord has to, part of their process is to upload the lease agreement or, you know, some proof that there is a landlord-tenant relationship, the tenant's identity, the residential address, and some document that shows what the monthly rent amounts is. And then they are also attesting under penalty of perjury in their application of what rent amounts were owed. So that's just the first step. The tenant has to review and agree with it. So part of the tenant's process is to look at those amounts, and if it's not right, you're not, you know, you're not agreeing to that, and you can put what you think is right. So they do need the tenant to verify that that information is correct, and the tenant will verify their identity and verify that they are in fact the tenant that lives there. I hope that answers that question.
All right, thank you, Emily. Next, we'll go to Martha O'Connell. Martha, are you ready to ask your question?
Okay, first of all, this is not a criticism of housing because they're doing a great job. But I just wanted to point out, I was asked to review the postcard because I'm not speaking as a commissioner, but I'm on the Housing Commission and I represent the people in the mobile home parks. And we really need a phone number on those postcards because a lot of people, I'm telling you, particularly seniors and low income people, they don't have computer access. And I live in a senior park and I'm telling you the absolute truth. They're scared to death to even get on the computer. They have the computer. I say, my God, just get on the internet. It's the greatest thing since sliced bread. But I have requested that they add a phone number. So Michelle or anybody else from the city of San Jose, if you could please do your best to make that happen.
Martha, thank you for sharing that. I have not seen the final postcards, so I will make sure we do that. The postcard is getting the word out about the state program that is available right now. So the state does have a phone number, and so we will add that. And yes, the local program, when it launches in May, will have a phone number. And Martha, I will also commit to emailing you because we have some strategies around mobile home parks where we might actually be looking at doing some actual, kind of like they're doing pop-up vaccine clinics right now. We're going to take actually and maybe do some pop-up application clinics. So folks who don't have internet access might be able to do that. We're studying that and the safety of that because with COVID still going on, how we might be able to do that. But that's one of the things that we're working with one of our community partners on is how we can do pop-up community rent assistance clinics.
Michelle, just one real important point. Please include Ryan Jasinski, who represents the park owners on that email, because he and I have been working on a ton of projects and he's a really cool guy and he will help you.
That is awesome. Thank you, Martha.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Martha. Appreciate the question. And our next question is going to come from Kathleen King. So Kathleen will unmute you in just a moment.
Thanks, Ramona. Can you hear me? So I did catch that undocumented can apply. I thought I saw that in Emily's slides. Can I recommend that be very clear right up front to help a lot of us? And so then it does not count as public charge. Do we have to worry about public charge? No. Okay. Can you make sure that's really clear up front? That'd be really helpful. Thank you.
That's a good question. So can undocumented people apply? I know you mentioned that immigration status will not be asked. That question doesn't even show up on any of the documents, but can we confirm that that is true, that folks who might not be documented can apply?
Confirming, Ramona, that undocumented individuals can. And thank you, Kathleen, for the comment. We will absolutely make that more prominent in our presentations moving forward.
And it won't affect public charge, right?
It will not.
Thanks.
Okay, perfect. So the next question is from Allison McDonald. Allison, can you hear us?
Yes, thank you. So I had a couple questions, I think, for Chad. I saw in your slide that the local program would be similar to the state program in that it would provide landlords with 80% of what's owed if they waive the other 20%. And I was under the impression I'd seen information that the local program was for the folks, the very low income folks, was actually going to be trying to provide 100% of what was owed. So I wanted clarification on that. But my other question is, what happens to those applications that are being funneled into the state application for very low income folks prior to your May 10th rollout? So if they apply to the state now, but your program rolls out on May 10th, what happens with their application in the meantime? Will they still be in the, yeah, will they still be in the hopper for your program? And I think that was more of a more important question if your program was providing 100% of the rent owed as opposed to 80%. And I did have one comment from the experience, from what I've read, the tenant, when their landlord does the application first, they get the email notification inviting them to participate. I think they only have 10 days to respond. They don't have to complete the application by that deadline, but they do need to respond within 10 days, I believe. So I think that's an important piece of information for tenants to know. If they get that email, they need to do something within 10 days.
Thanks for your very insightful and great questions, Allison. If I forget one of them, remind me, please. First and foremost, the 10 days actually goes both ways. So let's just say, for example, that the tenant applies and then there's the request to the landlord to see if they will participate. There's also a time limit on that. And if they don't, then we can turn around and actually provide the assistance directly to the tenant. So what I'm trying to say is that 10-day deadline goes both ways. Are providing the 80% of the back rent, because that is what's in the Senate bill, California Senate Bill 91, that says if the landlord agrees, they take 80% of the back rent and then write off the other 20%. So it is actually 100% of the arrears. It's just a way to make the money go further. So I'm hoping that clarifies. It's not that we're only paying 80% and they still owe the other 20%. It's actually through that deal, they do get 100% of the arrears addressed. And I'm going to try to remember, as I suspected, I can't remember what I guess it was technically the second question was. I apologize, Allison, if you could trigger my memory, please.
Oh yeah, I thought I was muted again. Yeah, so what happens to the applications if tenants apply now and they qualify for the local program, but your local program's not rolling out till mid-May? So what happens in the meantime?
Thank you. And Emily, feel free to add on, but right now, all of the folks who would qualify for our local program come mid-May are qualified at the state level. So they are helping everyone from 0% income AMI all the way up to 80%. And there are some organizations in the community, like Michelle mentioned, like Catholic Charities, Project Sentinel, that do have some capacity to assist with the applications. So right now their application would get processed and in fact prioritized because it's below the 50% AMI. If anyone wants to add anything, but hopefully that clarifies. So they do not have to wait.
Chad, if I can add, Allison, to answer the second part of your question is, Michelle and I have been working very closely with the state to make sure that those people that, say that they submit their application on May 9th and our program rolls out, that they would actually stay with the state program. And that there is no confusion or that they're not going to get kicked back to the local program. They would stay with the state. Does that answer your question, Allison?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. Okay, so the next question is going to come from Mitch Mankin. Mitch, we are unmuting you now. You should be able to ask your question.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify something, and I didn't see this in the material, so I wanted to make sure about it. As far as I understand it, the rent that was due between March 2020 and August 2020, that rent is completely 100% civil debt, can't be evicted for it ever. But since there's been no update since the state legislation passed, it's all supposedly due in August. So I'm wondering if there's any informational efforts about that to let people know that they cannot be evicted for that debt, because I think we're pretty clear about the September to present, but the other stuff before is less so. Thanks, appreciate it.
That's correct. That's the protected period, and we're doing our best to have educational webinars, also Project Sentinel and with other organizations. It's a little complicated, but we do want people to know if it's just over the summer of last year, if you've submitted your declaration, that's civil date, and you can't be. Unfortunately, it seems as though a lot of people went to great lengths to pay their rent during that time, and maybe to their detriment later on when they maxed out credit cards or whatever. So that's what we find a lot with our calls, is that people were doing their best to pay the rent over that period, and they may have just a very little fraction that's due from that period.
And
But
if I can add, if folks visit the state website, there is an opportunity for you to enter your situation, and they give you a report that shows you, what your protections are at a very high level, Ramona, and we can share that with you so that you can share with folks that RSVP'd for today's event, because it is an interesting report, and it shows you this protected period versus a transition period. And obviously you'd still have to work with your landlord, and there are resources out there to help you with mediation or representation, but it is very confusing. And I think the state has done a good job with that website to at the very least give you the baseline information that you need in order to understand what your situation falls under.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful, and thanks for the question. Next, we want to hear from Marty Estrada, who has a question for the panelists.
Hello, panelists. Thank you for your presentation. It was great. My name is Marty Estrada from an agency called Midtown Family Services. And my question is, what guarantees does the tenant have if the landlord agrees to forgive the debt of landlord from trying either to evict or trying to collect later from the tenants? Thank you.
I can take this unless Consola, do you want to? Okay.
Go ahead, Emily.
So we're doing a very strong outreach campaign with lots of agencies to make sure tenants do understand these rights. So there's that. We're trying to be proactive to make sure everybody understands their rights and responsibilities, but there's also other gates, if you will. So when the landlord if they do attempt to go collect that 20%, there is a lot of requirements in filing a lawsuit, either small claims or otherwise, that the landlord has to show that they made attempts to apply for or cooperate with the tenant for rent relief. And there are lots of checks about that they have to check off on forms to, to try to prove their case. And their award would be, if they didn't even cooperate with any rent relief, like if the tenant only got 25%, that's going to impact what they could actually sue for, because they have to show that they cooperated or that they have tried to apply in some way. So they should not be able to collect that 20%.
The other thing is the state of California does have some resources on the website for those who are not following the rules, and for folks to file complaints with the Fair Housing Department. So I think, there will be repercussions for those who do not follow the rules that are laid out in SB 91, or who are trying to take advantage of their tenant situations.
Great, thank you guys. Next, want to hear from Philip Cosby.
All right, thank you. So for a very low income family who will probably be seeking rental help through the county program when it rolls out, is there anything, but they've never had contact with homeless preventive services, should they be making contact with HPS right now in preparation for the process going through?
Thank you for the question, Philip. If the household can apply to the state program. You know, that's kind of one of the takeaways we'd like to share with everybody today, is that the state program is active. If what you're saying, Philip, is that the household does not qualify or that there's some underlying circumstances, absolutely, I'll defer to Chad in terms of how to get connected to the HPS system.
Yeah, thank you. I think I would answer it, well, twofold, but the first part was already what Consuelo said. The second thing is, if somebody needs help right now and they're in an urgent situation, you know, they don't know how they're going to pay rent in May, for example, then yes, like they should be going to the homelessness prevention system, and they might end up helping them, for example, apply at the state portal. That's what we're right now having all of the HPS homelessness prevention system partners do in the meantime. So hopefully that offers like a safety net and an option for them no matter what. And I'm going to try to remember the website. Actually, I can remember the phone number, which my colleagues at Sacred Heart are going to hate me right now for doing this, but I am going to say the phone number out loud in case there is a family that really does need help right now. And they can call 408-926-8885. Typically during the daytime. I think they can leave a message and make sure that they get routed appropriately. And like I said, they may end up at the state portal. So if they want to go there straight first, that would be also a great option.
And Ramona, if I can add the state number, it's 833-430-2122.
That's very helpful. And I'll see if we can get these numbers in a document or in some kind of email, and maybe we can email them out to everybody who joined us today. We have all the email addresses, and maybe we can send it out to everyone. I think that would be helpful, just in case you couldn't write it down fast enough. So thank you guys very much. So the next question is going to come from Milton Wayne. Okay. Milton, are you able to speak? Let's see, we unmuted you, but hopefully you might be having a technical problem. We can come back to you, but let's give it one more sec.
Hello, my name is Milton Wayne. Do you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm a landlord and I'm handicapped. I have applied for rent relief program, but my application is granted, but no funding because some problem with my tenancy. We apply almost the same day, but until now I cannot get any funding because the tenant apply something, they give some information incorrect. I don't know. And my tenant is not always ignore me, so I don't know how to do. I have evidence here of me the money for 9 months rent, about 32,300. And the handicap, I very difficult on this COVID-19. So how can you? I don't know what happened, but why my tenant have applied too, but we cannot. I think the case manager not review our case. So my case still not funding. My application not funded yet. I applied on March 15 or March 16 something. I forgot the day. Much. So how can you help me?
Okay.
Great question, Milton. Thank you so much for that. You know, as we mentioned, the state did roll out the program on March 15th, but they only started processing the applications. Earlier in the week, they informed Michelle and I that they had a little over 1,900 applications that they were working through. So it's quite possible, Milton, if they have not responded to you, that they are still working through that. If you are able to share with us either offline by emailing one of us your contact information, we would be happy to call you and follow up to see what we can do to help you. And I don't know if Milton left. We don't see him on the screen anymore.
Yes, so Milton is still there. I think he's now muted, but is there a certain email address, Consuelo, that he should reach you at, and others who are listening who want to, talk to you one-on-one about their specific case? What would be the best email address?
We can give you that, Ramona, after, just because we want to give the state a little time to process the applications. Yeah. If Milton is already connected to the state through their website and the portal, then it would be that same email address. But I'd say if Milton, if you have not heard back in a week or so, then Ramona, we can give them my email address so that they can contact.
Okay.
Or anybody else on the team. We're working really closely together to make sure that we hear these comments from the public so that we can take it back and share with the state what we're hearing.
So it's not unusual if you haven't heard back yet, because they're just now starting to go through the process. So if folks have applied, don't panic if you haven't heard anything yet, right? That's
correct.
The takeaway.
Yeah, I think it's important to remember what Emily said. This is a program that launched very quickly on March 15th, and there are very challenging federal requirements to read. Each application has to be verified, and some of it's automated and some of it is not. And when we talked to them on Monday, the 1,900 applications that Consuelo mentioned are just in Santa Clara County. There's actually 6,000 in the state of California, and that's actually low compared to what the need is that we know. So there's lots of money that will still be available. It's not like the program's maxed out. It's just, anytime you start up something like this, it takes, the startup time, it can be challenging, and, getting that surge of phone calls, that surge of applications on day 1 or day 2 is probably, there's probably just a backlog.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you for answering that. And the next question, we have about 5 more, and we're going to go till about 6:30, so 15 more minutes. We'll try to get through these as quickly as we can. The next question is from Catherine Hedges.
Hi, thanks very much. And I strongly recommend that you do the pop-ups. I was just at a PACT meeting, and apparently there's a lot of people who won't have phones. And also, apparently a lot of people will use text on their phone, but not email. So keep that in mind. My question is, someone had a question earlier about evictions, and I understand that the answer is about, oh, well, if they've gone through the process, there's all these like administrative checks, but how is that going to stop a landlord from doing a self-help eviction, which is illegal, but they do it anyway, or just sending intimidating letters to tenants? Like, I got an intimidating letter that wasn't officially an eviction, but they were trying to get me to move out on my own.
Thank you, Catherine, for the question. Maybe I can kick it off and see if others want to chime in. One of the other, and today's discussion wasn't about the eviction protections, but it's the same people, the same group of us that are also working on deciphering that state bill and figuring out how to communicate and convey people's rights in an easy to digest way. So what part of the work that we're doing also with Project Sentinel and the Law Foundation, Catherine, is to really understand where the gaps in services are, so that if people do feel that there is some intimidation from their landlord, that you have a resource to go to, either through mediation or adding additional resources to the self-help desk, because there are some things that are unavoidable. Where I think there was another caller who asked, what's to stop the landlord from taking action? And looking at it through the lens of a landlord, what's the guarantee that a tenant won't try to do something that isn't necessarily on par with what the landlord wants, right? So we are doing another body of work around evictions to make sure that resources are out there and that we're all coordinating Emily actually is hosting bi-weekly meetings with a number of providers, including representatives from the city and the county, to try to figure out ways that we can add additional resources and be very consistent with our messaging. Emily, I'm not sure if you want to share additional resources. Maybe we can, Ramona, also give you a few phone numbers. The county has a landing page around evictions, as well as our SCC Rent Help website that we can share with you.
Yeah, and again, if you go to our website, housing.org, we serve most of Santa Clara County, but if a tenant is experiencing anything like this, we urge you to call us or the Law Foundation. We have those resources as well. And we can educate you on what your rights are and what your options are. But there's there's stronger penalties for retaliatory behavior like self-help eviction in SB 91. And certain things may rise to the level of the Attorney General may want to know that these things are going on. So there's a very strong interest in those actions not being taken. But we are coordinating some outreach efforts to try to really help the most vulnerable understand what their rights are and feel confident in that.
I think that's so important because that's always on people's minds is what protections they have if they are still facing eviction after everything. So it's helpful to know. Okay, Marie C is next. Marie?
Hello? My question is, this has come up in some meetings, that some people are afraid to apply for the rent relief program because they have more people in their unit than is listed on their lease. Can you answer that question? Whether they have something to fear?
Marie, I'm happy to respond to that, at least as far as how we think of that in our local homelessness prevention system, which will be the same kind of values that we're looking at for the local COVID response. And that is that we know that some of the most vulnerable households in Santa Clara County are exactly those households that are room rentals, non-traditional lease arrangements, no lease arrangement, multiple households in the same apartment, right? And so we have definitions around what makes up a household in that usually around, family members or those who share food. So you very often in the same house, for example, could have 3 households who would all be able to apply separately. And we will be really focused on making sure that those households, in fact, are the ones that we can assist whenever possible. Because to the caller, I want to say caller, but the Zoomer before that, kind of question about, these other ways of quote unquote evicting people, right? There are so many other ways that don't go through the court system that have nothing to do with SB 91 that technically means that someone leaves the unit. And we really want to make sure that those people, those families know about this program and know that we will be helping all of those circumstances. And it's one of the benefits of not only having the treasury funds, but also the partnerships locally and other private funding sources that allow us to be flexible and make sure that we can accommodate. And so that's, frankly, why we do this type of webinar and kind of other ways of getting the word out, because we want to make sure that all the community members and then all of those, nearly 50 organizations are helping us make sure that the people who really need the help, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of documentation status, mixed status, et cetera, know that they can come and get help, without judgment and with the same level of service that anyone else is going to get. So it's a great question and it's really important for us.
Yeah, that was an important question because I've heard that is a fear for folks. So thank you, Marie, for that question. We have 3 more. We're going to try to get through them all. And the next one comes from Robert Aguirre. Robert, you should be able to speak. Robert, can you hear us? Okay, we may come back to Robert, but in the meantime, Miguel Sanchez. Miguel?
Yep, I'm here. Thank you.
Perfect.
This is a wonderful program. I'm a little concerned of how it's very heavily weighted towards the back rent support. That's where the big percentages are, the 80%. And then anything forward looking is 25%. That's where we quickly go into the 25% realm. There's also the concern about you guys are doing a wonderful effort to bring this whole system up, but the whole system won't be up until mid-May. And in June 30th, we have the kind of the cliff of the end of the rent moratorium. So my question is, and I know it's very difficult to foresee this because we don't know what the state will do come June 30th, but are you guys building a system, and should we as community advocates continue to point our community towards your system past June 30th? Do you see a system where you'll be focused on paying a lot of funds to cover the back rent, or will you still be a resource for potentially helping people, even if it's just for that 25% in July or August, or it would be a shame for you guys to put all this effort building this wonderful system and then have people apply maybe for May and June, and then who knows what happens after that, right?
Thank you, Miguel, for the question. Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I was just going to say thanks for this terrific question. And actually, I think if we go back, the slide that Chad talked about, the difference with the local program is that we actually are looking at when families need forward rent, if their jobs haven't returned, if they are still struggling, we're looking at what does it need to take that family to stability in the months going forward. I think in the slide I presented, these federal funds can be used through September 30th of 2022. And there is a second tranche of funding coming. So the money we have right now is phase one, but there is additional funding coming thanks to the American Rescue Plan. And so our goal is really, how do we help intentionally help our lowest income families from now through September 30th of 2022. So we're not going away on June 30th. June 30th is just the eviction moratorium deadline that is currently in place. Our programs will be, the state program will be around until the state runs out of money from this funding. But they're getting a second tranche from the rescue plan also. What that looks like, we don't know yet. What we do know is that our local program, we're planning for the long term.
That's helpful. Consuelo, was there anything you wanted to add, or I think someone else? Or
no,
not,
Michelle
that's okay.
covered it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Ramona.
Okay, perfect. No problem. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, so let's try to see if Robert's back with us. Robert, can you hear us, and can you speak? Let's see if we can hear you. Unfortunately, we still can't hear Robert. So let's go ahead and try to talk to Jayantika. I'm so sorry if I said it wrong. Jayantika, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. My name is Jayantika / Tita. I go by Tita, and I work for Silicon Valley Independent Living Center. I was very impressed with the quality of presentation. And I'm just, since we have been working with people from grassroots level, I'm just trying to see how it's going to be implemented and enforced. And I wish that there'll be people like us who can hold some people's hand to have the advantage of the wonderful plan that you guys presented just now, because there are people who cannot speak English. There are people who do not have computer, people who are not comfortable in sharing their issues. So I'm just representing that population. And I hope that, I'm sure you have some plans, or maybe as you start functioning, it'll come. And I wish, that should be considered, especially in Bay Area. And if I am saying little more intense, please excuse me, but that's what is my personal feelings. A part of the population is definitely, they are the outliers, but they need it very intensely, the help.
Thank you for the comment. We're absolutely, that's one of the reasons why we were very thoughtful in creating our local program. And as Chad mentioned, in addition to our homelessness prevention system partners, we do have an extensive network of community-based partners that are doing exactly what you just mentioned, going out to the community and helping them apply. You know, Michelle and I are looking at different ways that we can leverage our existing COVID relief efforts. Through our disaster service workers. We have, for instance, some of the clinics that were set up either for vaccination or for testing. You know, how do we use those opportunities to share with the community, connect them with the program, and if there's resources available, actually help them apply. So there's definitely a body of work that we're doing on community engagement and outreach that we didn't touch on tonight, but happy to come back once our local program is running to share with you the different ways in which we're engaging with the community. And Michelle, I'm not sure if you want to share anything more on that front.
I just want to reassure everyone too that the local program, we are making sure that the partners are available to serve folks in the languages that they are comfortable speaking, and that our materials will be available in multiple languages as well. There are, while the state's website does not have all the different languages available, the actual documents, and I think Emily's team has posted a number of them on their website. So if you go to that housing.org site, there are flyers, for example, the landlord checklist, the tenant checklist, they're available in English, Spanish, Vietnamese, Korean, Tagalog, Chinese. So, so those are some resources that are available, but these are things we're really thinking about with our own local program as well. It's been really critical over the last year to meet folks and get the word out, whether it's about COVID and safety precautions or about the eviction moratoriums in the languages that our community members are comfortable with.
That's so critical. Thank you, Michelle. I guess we'll try Robert one last time. It looks like his hand went up again. Robert. Looks like he's unmuted, but unfortunately we still can't hear you. I'm sorry, but maybe you can email your question to us. I know you have my email, Robert. Email it over, and then we'll try to get an answer from one of the panelists, or you know, to refer you to a resource. I apologize, we still couldn't hear you. Thank you, everybody. It's 6:30 on the dot, so that wraps up our program. And as we learned today, the first step to getting help right now is reaching out to the state and applying through its programs until mid-May when the local program launches. But for now, everyone should apply by visiting the website housing.ca.gov. We have a little screen. We're going to put it up right now so everybody can jot down those resources. So hopefully you can see that okay. So again, housing.ca.gov. And that wraps up our discussion. I hope this webinar helped our viewers and readers understand their rights and what they can do to get rental relief as quickly as possible. Thanks again to our sponsors, Destination Home, Working Partnerships USA, and Sacred Heart Community Service. Thank you to our panelists for lending your time and your expertise to this very important topic. We appreciate it very much. And a video recording of today's webinar will be available on the San Jose Spotlight website next week. So if folks were not able to tune in tonight, they're able to watch that video at a later time. And to follow our coverage at San Jose Spotlight and to learn more about how to support our nonprofit journalism and programming like this, please visit our website, sanjosespotlight.com. Thank you again for tuning in, and we hope to see you at a future event. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.